Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Lights Camera Author, the podcast where we take you behind the pages and into the lives of the writers who preserve our cultural history, our entertainment heritage, and the stories that deserve to be remembered. I'm your host, Jim Juno. The Presley name is recognized around the world, and for decades it has been synonymous with music, fame, and one of the most influential entertainers in history, Elvis Presley. Yet behind that famous name is a family whose story extends far beyond the spotlight. Today's guest, Donna Presley, offers readers a deeply personal perspective in her new book, Presley, A Testament, Faith, Family, and a Life Lived. And rather than focusing solely on celebrity, Donna reflects on faith, family relationships, perseverance, and the importance of preserving memories before they are lost to time. Whether you're a lifelong Elvis Presley fan or a student of American history, or someone who just enjoys inspiring family stories, today's conversation promised to reveal a side of the Presley family that few people have had the opportunity to experience. So, Donna, welcome to Lights Camera Author.
Thank you so much, Jim. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited about the interview.
I tell you, I am too. It's not often that first off, full disclosure, I'm a fan of Elvis Presley.
I will, absolutely. Who isn't?
Exactly. And to actually have somebody who you knew him, you grew up with him.
Yes.
And just really quickly, if you don't mind me asking, how old were you when he passed away?
When he passed away, I was 27.
Oh, 27. So you knew him for almost your adult. I mean, you're
Oh,
30.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, from the time I was four, my first memory of Elvis was 4 years old.
Right.
And even at that early age, because he and his mom and dad had come to visit us at our home when I was four, and because he had a show that he was appearing in, just very close, very nearby. And I remember even then just seeing him, he was just so, even at tender age, I knew that there was something special about him, the charisma that he had and everything. And then, I would spend, holidays there, my family would. And then when I was 10, I started visiting Graceland and staying every summer when I was out of school. So,
Fantastic.
yeah.
Well, now, and you're only 30 now, so
Absolutely. Thank you, Jim. I'll take that.
she's better looking than I am at 66. My gosh.
But you're very kind. Thank you so much.
No problem. But what inspired you to write Presley, A Testament, Faith, Family, and Life, A Life Lived at this point?
Well, Jim, there's just been so much written, about Elvis. And in 1987, my mom wrote a book called One Flower, and remembering Elvis, Elvis as I remember him. And she wrote it because there have been so many books put out. And then, I reprinted it and added some stories to it. But then recently we did the Testament and Presley and Faith, Family, and A Life Lived because I wanted people to realize that, Elvis went out and made the Presley name famous, but there was a family behind him who taught him values. My grandmother, our grandmother Dodger, as he called her, and Uncle Vernon and Aunt Gladys, my mom, because excuse me, my mom was 9 years old when Elvis was born and lived next door to him. So they played together as children. And the values and everything that Elvis learned at my grandmother and my family's knee, I was raised with those same values and, spent time with him and around him and grew up in the Presley family. So I knew what he was about and I knew what his values were and his faith. I knew what a strong faith he had in God and how he, tried every way he possibly could to give back because, as he said, God has blessed me so greatly, I would be remiss if I didn't give back. But he learned those values from the family. And so, since I grew up with those same people and same family values, I felt it was important, to let people know and let people know that we're still continuing those values and that, although so many of us are gone now. I lost my sister in 2024 and my brother as well. And so it's just me and my immediate family left. And So, I felt it was important for people to realize that we did, we lived a life that's, and we were blessed to live a life around somebody who was so iconic and such an influencer. I hate using that word because it's a today word, but he changed lives to me for millions of people all over the world, and 49 years after his death, he's still doing so. And those values need to be continued, especially in today's world. So I wanted people to realize that, just because you grow up as a Presley, and just because you grow up, around Elvis and even himself, as wonderful and perfect as you would think his life would be, he had trauma, he had problems, he had losses, and it's his faith that helped him get through those. And the same comes, is true for me. We've all had problems in our lives, we've all had losses in our life, and it's by faith and the love of family that you have around you that you can get through that and come out on the other side to the sunshine that God provides for us. And he lifts us up during the worst times in our lives and carries us through those moments. And so I want people to realize that.
And I don't think there has been one individual who has had more written about them uh, since they've been gone, since they've died, than Elvis Presley. I mean, and a lot of these books are sensational. That's a kind term I'm going to use.
Yes.
You know,
I,
yeah, because apparently a lot of people feel like if you have to have a controversial story in
yeah,
order to sell books.
right.
But you and your in this book, it really tells about you wanted the truth to be told. I mean, was Elvis perfect? No, he had faults.
Yeah.
We all do, but I mean, doesn't it seem like people have made name money off his name?
There's so many people, Jim, and I mean, that are still doing so today. I mean, it doesn't have to, I mean, three-fourths of the people never even met Elvis,
Yeah.
and the ones who have met him, the ones that were in his close circle that have written sensational books and said, vile and disgusting and bad things about him. But I think it's just awful because Elvis gave all those people, all of us, he gave all of us love. He gave us loyalty. He gave us respect, and he cared for us. He took care of so many people and provided for so many people. And for them to take his name and his image and to take away the respect and the dignity that he so rightly deserves is very upsetting to me, extremely so.
I had a real good friend of mine. We were talking about Elvis Presley, some of the stuff the garbage that has come out.
Yeah,
And she said, and I remember her quote, "Why must we always destroy our legends?"
yeah.
And we don't need to do that. Like I remember in one of your YouTube videos, you say that, Vernon had a saying, "What happens on the hill stays on the hill." See, I have watched
You
your
have,
YouTube.
you have indeed. You've been watching, and
Yeah.
and thank you for subscribing. I appreciate that very much.
And I want to let people know the YouTube channel is Donna Presley Official, and the website is donnapresley.com. That will have a little QR code at the bottom of the screen, so you can scan it and go right there. But what was your childhood like growing up as a member of the Presley family?
Well, when you're in that bubble, you don't really think about it. It was just an ordinary family to me. I would go in. We all knew Elvis's job. We all knew he was famous, but it didn't occur to us to treat him like a star, like a legend, like an icon, because around us he was just Elvis. And that's the wonderful thing about it, Jim. That's why he wanted family so close to him, because he knew that we loved him for himself. It didn't matter if he was Elvis or Elvis Presley. We
Mhm.
loved him either way. And he knew we'd always love him. And so he wanted to keep us close, to keep him grounded, and to know that he could always count on us to love him no matter what. And so, I want people to realize that Elvis was a human being. He had faults, we all do, but he had illnesses that are very difficult to deal with.
Hmm.
Glaucoma. He in really bad insomnia, a twisted colon. I mean, really painful diseases that he had to deal with on a daily basis just to continue, his job and his life. And he loved it to the hilt. He loved every minute of it. But it took a lot for him to be Elvis Presley.
Yeah.
And so, I think it's important for people to realize just what it was. He was just such a wonderful and loving and caring man. I'd go into the house there at Graceland, and, he might be sitting at the table and he'd, say, "Hello, Donnie," which is what he always called me. Elvis he always had nicknames for everybody, and mine was Donnie. But "Hey, Donnie, how are you? What's going on in your life," and so forth. But he always wanted to know about you. He always made it a point to find out what was going on in your life. And if you needed advice, he was there to give it, and which he did give me advice, and he talked to me. And it just, we discussed really personal, important matters, and that really was something that meant so much to me. That but he was just around the house. He was just Elvis, and he didn't want to be treated any other way. And today a lot of people ask, "Well, you don't have a lot of photos with Elvis." No, I don't, but neither does either any other family member, inside Graceland. There might be some that were taken on tour, like with Uncle Vernon and things like that. But inside Graceland, that was his home, his sanctuary. And he was the most photographed person in the entire world. So every time he walked out the door, he had a camera stuck in his face. So we respected his privacy and didn't do that.
Yeah.
And you have to remember back then, not everybody carried a camera like we do today.
Not everybody didn't have one of these,
No,
so.
that's for sure.
Now, you know what, you mentioned a really good thing that he had like medical problems, and a lot of people nowadays, you got to remember when Elvis passed away, that was almost 50 years ago.
Yes.
So medicine back 50 years ago isn't like it is today. Maybe
No.
maybe they could have helped him,
Yes.
nowadays. But he was suffering a lot. I mean, he suffered a
Of
lot
course.
for his art.
He did suffer a lot. And I mean, back then as well, Jim, we didn't realize the interactions of one medication for one thing and one medication for something else, how they interact and so forth. And so, I think people need to realize that. I mean, they're looking at Elvis's life a lot of times through the eyes of 2026 instead of back then. And things were a
Hmm.
whole lot different at that time.
Did carrying the Presley name ever create expectations or misconceptions about who you were?
Well, yeah, at times,
Mhm.
at times it did. I mean, when I was in school and so forth, the funny story I got to tell you about this is when I knew that everybody knew that Elvis was, an icon, a superstar. I was in, I think, the fourth or fifth grade, and I was in the cafeteria. And, we didn't talk about the fact that we were related to Elvis because, in the first place, we lived in a small town in Missouri. Who's going to think this little small town girl is going to be related to the biggest star in the world? But this girl walked over to me and she said, "Someone told me that you're related to Elvis Presley. Is that true?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, why don't you talk about it?" And I said, "Well, for one thing, who would believe it?" It doesn't come up in conversation. But she said, "No." She said, "Would you mind touching my milk carton?" And I said, "Why?" She said, "Because I'm a huge fan of Elvis, and you're the closest thing I'll ever get to him. You have the same blood, the same DNA.
Wow.
And I can't see him, but I can see you." So I said, "Okay." So I touched her milk carton. She went away happy.
Even then, I mean, my gosh, I mean, it's like, your book discusses a lot about forgiveness.
Hmm.
So how has forgiveness shaped your life? Because, I mean, like in your people who see your YouTube channels, your YouTube videos,
Hmm.
I mean, you've had to forgive a lot of people when it comes to Elvis Presley.
This is very true. Well, to be honest, it's been And it's not always been a difficult, it's not always been an easy thing to do, Jim. It
Yeah.
really hasn't. Because when people attack you for something that you're not guilty of and things like that, just because of who you are, it makes it very difficult. But I went through a really, really traumatic and horrible marriage. And
Hmm.
there was a lot of things that he did, and besides being physically abusive, he did some really, really bad things, and he was very controlling. Besides being abusive, and he killed himself because he was arrested for the things that he had done, and he was going to prison, and so he decided to kill himself, which he was a horrible fentanyl drug addict.
Mm.
And he decided to kill himself, which he did with fentanyl poisoning, because he would put in a 100 milligram patch of fentanyl
Wow.
and chew it. So anyway, he killed himself, and then but I was left in my family to clean up his mess, and had that stigma of him having him killed himself, and the fact that he did do the horrible things that he did, and that he was a drug addict. And so I was very resentful, and I had a lot of anger in my life because of the situation he had put me in, and the years that I'd spent dealing with this. So my youngest son came to me. He said, "Mom," he said, you've been a Christian your whole life." And I said, "Yes, I have." And he said, "But I'm worried about you. I'm worried that you're going to send your soul to hell because of the way that you feel about
Mm.
Buddy." And he said, "I want you to talk to our pastor." And at first I said, no, 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 because I'm a very private person. I don't like to discuss personal things. Although in recent times I've had to quite a bit. But
Yeah.
if it helps somebody else, then so be it. I'm happy to help somebody else in the same situation. But I went and I spoke with the pastor. My son was with me. And I told him the situation, and my son said, "I'm just worried that she'll send her soul to hell because of her anger and her resentment." And he said, "No, no, no. You have a right to feel the way that you do. So you're not going to. That's not going to send you to hell." And I said, "Well, I was in prison, and he was the jailer. He had the key."
Mm.
And the minister looked at me, and he said something that hit me right between the eyes, Jim. He said, "He still is." And I said, "Excuse me?" And I said, he's been dead for, a while now. And he said, "Yes, but he still controls you." And he said, "Until you can forgive him and let go of the resentment and the anger, you're stopping God's full blessings upon yourself." And when
Mm.
he said that, it was like I had an epiphany. I mean, he's right. Why am I letting him still control my life or what he's done? I've already lived through it. Why do I continue to, you know, keep this going? And
Exactly.
so, in doing that, and I try to forgive people, and when they say and do things, and this is the honest to God's truth, Jim. You can ask Karen, but I pray for those people. I do. I pray for them because when you go after somebody just just because of who they are, or just because you don't like them, then you need forgiveness, and I pray for them. And so I do forgive them. I'm not going to hold that anger and resentment into my life. I'm not going to let that control me anymore. So I
Right.
move on, and I'm still here. And, I've had to live the life that I've lived, and I've had an amazing life. I've had troubles, I've had trials, but I've had an amazing life because of
Well,
the family that I grew up and because of Elvis. We were so greatly blessed, and everyone around him who knew him, and who, uh, was given this wonderful opportunity to live lives that most people can only dream of.
Elvis has always been and is probably always will be an international icon.
Yes.
But, what do you hope people learn about him as a family member?
I hope that they find out and they realize, don't listen to these sensational stories that are either completely not true or they take a little bit of the truth and turn it into this exaggerated form that's not even near the truth. It kind of reminds me of like, when we were kids, we used to sit in a circle and somebody would say something and whisper it in the other person's ear. And by the time it got back around, it wasn't even
Yeah.
what they were talking about in the first place. To not listen to that and just pay attention to the fact that he always stood up for his faith in God. He always stood up for his country, for his love of family and friends. He was respectful. He was kind. He was giving. He was generous beyond a fault. I mean, just gave and gave and gave, not only of money, but of his time and his wisdom and gave. And everybody who benefited from that and whose lives were elevated. I want people to realize that whatever's being said by those people, that's their perspective, that's their agendas. They all have an agenda by doing this. I want them to realize the man that Elvis was, who he was, what he did for the entire world, not only just musically and clothing and movies and everything else, but what he still gives to the world every day in his love and kindness and respect and dignity, and giving people dignity. And he deserves that.
I saw a video last night actually that teenagers saw, I mean, these are high school kids.
Mm-hmm.
I say kids, these are high schoolers who saw the movie Epic,
Yes.
and all of a sudden they're big Elvis fans now.
Oh, yes.
You know,
See, that's another reason, Jim, is I want people to realize because there are young Elvis fans coming up, I don't want them to read this sensational stuff and these terrible stories about Elvis. I want them to know who he was and how he is today, 49 years after his death, still changing people's lives for the better.
it's hard to believe he would be 92 this year.
I know. I know.
I have trouble wrapping my head around that.
We always see him as this gorgeous, man, and to think about him aging is. But I think I know without a shadow of a doubt, Elvis was an ordinary man, Jim, but he was touched by God to do extraordinary things, and he certainly not only did that when he was alive, but he's still doing it today.
Is it hard seeing people take advantage of his name?
Yes.
Yeah, I
It's
can.
very
Yeah,
difficult, especially when they, what upsets me is they say they love him in one hand, but they'll say something terrible in the other.
yeah.
And I'm thinking, how can you do that? All he gave you everything. He gave all of us everything he had, in who he was and everything about it. And he shared everything with us. And how can you accept those things and then not be loyal to him because all he ever asked was loyalty.
Exactly. And he was so giving. I mean,
He was.
not just friendship and stuff, but he would strangers on the street,
Yes.
he would buy cars for, or
Yes.
yeah,
Many times he would read about someone the paper that, or see it on the news that a family was burned out of their home, or someone was in a hospital and needed, surgery or something and couldn't afford. He would pay for that, and a lot of times he would do that anonymously, and he'd say, "Just take care of it. Just let me know, and just don't tell him who did it." But I mean, he did things like that all the time, and that's the reason that. We created the Elvis Initiative because I wanted to continue that legacy of giving to people that are less fortunate or that have a problem, because we've all had to suffer, we've all had to go through bad times, and everybody needs that hope and everybody needs that helping hand. And so we just wanted to continue doing that.
well, fantastic. Well, Donna, thank you for joining us and sharing not only your family's history, but your remarkable journey of faith.
Well,
And the author's name is Donna Presley. The book is Presley: A Testament, Faith, Family, and a Life Lived. And it reminds us that while public figures may shape history, it's families who preserve the values, memories, and experiences for future generations. So, Donna, I really want to thank you for being on Light the Camera Author today.
thank you, Jim. It's my pleasure.
And always, you can look at the little QR code on the left and you can find out more about Presley: A Testament, Faith, Family, and a Life Lived. And if you like what you're hearing or seeing, Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and also to Donna's YouTube channel, Donna Presley Official. Again, until next time, I'm Jim Juno. Keep reading and keep discovering. And remember, every great story begins with a single page. That's Light Camera Author for now.